Hey FFR listeners, did you know that if you join our Patreon community, you can get nifty perks like early access, exclusive weekly bonus segments, access to our friendly Discord, and more? That's right, you can get cool stuff and help us keep doing FFR at the same time. What are you waiting for? Go to patreon.com/femfreak.
How do we get to a point where we can talk about the materiality of the Black body without falling into horrific patterns wherein it is just the body, where the corporality of Black people is always first and foremost, but we don't ever talk about other groups in the same way? Like, I don't know that I've ever heard someone say, like, the white body.
Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love. I'm Anita Sarkeesian, and I cannot sing. I'm joined today by two women who both set fire to their marriage beds, Carolyn Pettit.
Hey.
And Ebony Adams.
Hey.
This week we'll be talking about the acclaimed, genre-defying, supernaturally-tinged drama, Atlantics. Did you swallow your gum?
Nope, it's on here on my laptop.
Shut up. No, it's not.
Yeah, it is. There's no garbage can in here, so I'll throw it away when I leave.
That is so gross. There's a trash can right there. Y'all, okay. Ebony just stuck her gum on her computer.
No one else uses a computer but me.
Oh boy, that's how she treats feminist frequency property.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Carolyn, how are you this fine evening?
I'm doing pretty good. But, let me, so we used to do a segment called Entertainment News, and, we're talking about maybe bringing it back in one form or another. But I thought, just because I just literally saw this like 10 minutes or so before we're recording, I want to quickly mention this clip I just saw going around the Twitterverse of Trump at a rally, recent rally, railing against the fact that Parasite won Best Picture at the Oscars because it's a South Korean film and it's a foreign film. Now, keep in mind, this is a guy who, of course, because he loves and only understands and respects like domination and power and like strong arm tactics, loves like Kim Jong-un of North Korea, but but this South Korean film winning Best Picture is absolutely like unacceptable. And of course, it plays so well to his crowd, him complaining about a foreign film winning Best Picture. But also, one of the most revealing moments in his rant is when he says, Can't we get Gone with the Wind back?
Oh my God.
Because Trump is in many ways, at least as I put it on Twitter, a symptom of the fact that Gone with the Wind never really went away, right? But when he says Make America Great Again, Gone with the Wind is probably not too far from the America that he's conjuring in people's minds with that statement. So
what's really interesting is that I would have expected that Trump wouldn't even be aware of a film like Parasite, and so his anger, such as it is entirely manufactured. Right? It's been given to him by someone else, because as far as Trump himself is concerned, foreign films, I can't imagine this man sitting down to watch anything that isn't Fox News sound bites.
Maybe he likes Finding Nemo.
I can't.
Or Finding Dory. Are those different movies?
I think, honestly, he probably just sits around wondering when he can ask people about badgers again. Like, I can't imagine him watching anything.
What do you think Trump's favorite movie is?
Cannonball
Run?
Well,
so interestingly, he many years ago, there was a segment shot with Trump for an Academy Awards segment in which he talked about loving Citizen Kane. But
that tracks.
Oh, wow!
But it also in his like spiel about like why he loves it. I mean, his interpretation of the film is very, very different from what most like experts or whatever would interpret it as being about. Like, to him, it's about like a great man, like, or whatever, where like all of the kind of the criticism, the subtext, etc., is just like completely lost on him. And regarding Parasite, to be clear, it's extremely obvious in the clip that he's aware of the film because it won Best Picture, but he obviously hasn't seen it. I mean, he even says during his spiel, he's like, is it good? I don't know. Like he doesn't know or care. Like it's just the very idea of it winning that to him is wrong.
Do you think he watches films like It's a Wonderful Life and he's like, that Mr. Potter had the right idea? Oh my God. What a buffoon.
I feel like he would like a movie that is like
Dirty Harry?
Sure. No, but a movie that is like there's a movie I'm thinking of where it's supposed to be like critiquing racism, but it's also just doing it. But
Green Book?
Yeah, what?
Crash?
Anyways, it was an older film, whatever. Hey, Carol, quick question.
Yo.
Is that your radiator making noise in the background?
Oh, it sure is. Hey, okay, folks, if you don't already know, Shea Caro is a wonderfully luxurious apartment with vintage heating equipment that likes to make loud clangy noises. So if you hear any hisses and clangs, that's just the character and personality of my apartment coming through on the recording.
Perfect. Wow. Just wanted to call that out. It sounds a little bit like a faucet to me. That's my interpretation of the ambiance at Carol's house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's all part of the charm.
Charm. Speaking of charm, let's get into the main segment about Atlantics. When a wealthy tycoon building a massive tower in the Senegalese capital of Dakar withholds pay for months from a group of construction workers, he gives them no choice but to seek better fortunes across the sea in Spain. But once the men depart, strange things begin to take place. Meanwhile, a young woman named Ada is forced into marriage with wealthy Omar. Nobody knows anything about Omar. He's just rich. Anyways, but her heart belongs to Suleiman, one of the poverty-stricken workers who left on the ship. The night of her wedding, the marriage bed bursts into flames, and the detective assigned to investigate the case has no idea just how tangled up in its web he will become. Co-writer and director Maddie Diop's Atlantics is not a film that lends itself easily to plot summaries. It's poetic, haunted, richly textured film with concerns about gender, wealth, and power, and remarkably, when it entered competition at the 2019 Cannes Film Festival, it was the first film ever directed by a Black woman to do so. So there you go.
Yeah. So first of all, I absolutely loved this film. I loved it so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Carol. I was worried. I was worried that I would be the only person who liked this movie, but I loved it.
But it is hard. It is a tougher film to talk about than the films that we usually talk about on this podcast. Because at least, I think at least at first glance, in some ways, because it is more. I mean, at least the experience of watching this film and what a big part of what made it so compelling to me, just the texture and the atmospheric quality of it. And it's just visually to me, just so beautiful in its, the way that it evokes the Dakar as a city. Watching this film, I almost get frustrated watching films like this that are about people and places that I've almost never been exposed to in my cinematic diet, like as a white American person of many decades of age. Obviously, like extraordinary films, I'm sure are obviously, of course, are made in Senegal like all the time, or certainly this isn't the first. And yet, like stories like this, these characters, their culture. It's been basically completely absent from my entire cinematic diet. So just in that sense, to be like exposed to these images and these people and everything, it was just so wonderfully like stimulating and captivating. Not to mention my just deep appreciation of the skill with which the film weaves together its concerns about wealth and labor and power and gender and all of those things.
Yeah, I suggested this movie and I was very glad that y'all agreed to talk about it. The reality is that by far, the overwhelming majority of the things we talk about on this podcast, are white They are created by white filmmakers. They tend to be white stories. They also tend to be Western. And so I was really excited to learn about this film. By the way, it's available to stream on Netflix, and I encourage people to check it out. But I had heard about it when I learned that Mari Diop, the director, was the first Black woman to screen a film in competition at Cannes, which is absurd. It's so absurd that it's almost unbelievable. It is unbelievable. I did not know very much about the film going into it, and I was so immediately immersed in this African futurist, supernatural, slow-moving, as you say, Caro, poetic and haunted story. The way that it is shot, the way that the narrative is composed, it's not, it is and it is not about the love story between Ada and Suleiman and how she sort of lives through her grief and the ways that grief kind of, inhabits a community. It is also about the kind of interventions of colonialism and Western technology in a way as divorced from like African technologies that I just found so fascinating. Like the images of that tower in the background of those shots just blew me away. Just absolutely blew me away.
And I love the subtlety of it. Like, so it's a film that has like science fiction elements. The tower looks very much like something out of a science fiction film. It has supernatural elements, but so the feel of the film, though, for lack of a better term, okay. I think regular listeners of the podcast, know that there's a type of film we often refer to as the Caro film, which I would describe as often like a slice of life type movie, is one way of putting it. Like a film that kind of moves with, it's more interested in character than in narrative and things of that nature. And to me, like Atlantics it's a film full of genre elements, but it doesn't feel like a genre film.
Right.
It has the like slice of life kind of rhythm and observational quality and concern first and foremost with character. So those science fiction and like supernatural elements are there, but they're not handled in the conventional kind of mainstream formulaic entertainment way, which is not to say that I have a lot of respect for a lot of genre filmmaking. I don't mean to dismiss genre filmmaking out of hand, but to me, this was just so refreshing in the sort of naturalistic way that it handled this story that is full of really these elements that are paranormal or supernatural.
I think it's hard to even call it a genre film or supernatural in that it felt like it felt so naturally part of this story. Mm-hmm. Like it was definitely, there's a moment where you realize this is happening and you're kind of shocked. And I that was when I was like, wait, what? I like perked up. I was like, what's going on? But it feels, I don't know how to describe it. Like I'm not trying to be dismissive by saying this, but it feels like just a prop. Like it feels like such a way to engage the story as opposed to being like, this is a movie about sci-fi or this is a movie about, like it felt very natural. There's not a lot of fanfare. It was just, it's the kind of whimsy almost that is super subtle that like everyone in the world just kind of goes with. So it feels baked in and natural to the environment.
Yeah. I guess I know what you're saying, but when you said like it almost feels like a prop, that it's not something that infuses the entire film. I would say that in a way, for me, it does the precise opposite. I think, there's a version of this film that was created, in America, with a white cast, in which like surfaces and interiors are very sterile, and it has the look that we are accustomed to, like we are accustomed to seeing in a science fiction film or in a horror thriller. Excuse me. But part of what I loved about this is that, I was seduced into having my expectations subverted and not questioning it, because it did feel so natural and so easy. So, when we first see, I can't remember the character who's eyes we first see with like, sort of milky white. I'm going to spoil what happens. It's not the kind of film where, you're going to, like, there's a twist that I'm revealing. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. So these young men who go to sea, seeking any kind of a life because they haven't been paid by their asshole capitalist boss, all die at sea. Their spirits, their souls, something about them, they possess the bodies of people back home, including their wives, girlfriends. So you have these fantastic scenes of these young women walking the streets at night, exactly like zombies, in shadow and in silence. And this is the same movie that started off being, about a teenage girl falling in love, kissing, keeping things from her parents, etc. And yet there was no sort of seam. There was no demarcation that felt too abrupt for me. Like it flowed so easily.
It was very seamless. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way of describing it.
I think the larger themes are similarly elegantly handled. There's a moment. So after on the night of Ada and Omar's marriage, as we mentioned in the intro, the marriage bed just sort of bursts into flames, and it's pegged as like an arson case. And this young kind of, I think, promising detective is assigned to the case, and the detective kind of knows for reasons that there's a connection between the fact that this tycoon withheld pay from the construction workers for months, between that act of just absolute like injustice, an act that should be sort of criminal, and the subsequent, the arson and just everything that's happening in the wake of that. But when he brings it up to the commissar, his sort of supervisor at the police station, his boss is like, that's not our concern, right? The police do not care about violations committed by people in power. They do not care about whatsoever about the plight of the working class. Those are not the crimes that they are interested in. And the captain even says something like, the tycoon, he's been very good to us, right? So they benefit, right? They have a beneficial relationship with his wealth and power, and therefore like look the other way. And I think that the film is constantly doing things like that, where these larger concerns about power and labor and justice are very present in the film, and the film is very concerned with them, but they very, I would say, organically and elegantly woven into the narrative.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, crucially, the crime that the commissaire does want to investigate is the crime against the tycoon. So once these possessed girls break into his home and, threaten to set fire to the tower if he does not pay up the months of missing wages, this is the crime that the commissaire is concerned with and is given immediate priority. I think the ways that this film, both within the narrative and, sort of on the meta level, tackles the kind of like how this entire country, this entire society has been completely misshapen by the forces of colonialism and capitalism, such that, I always watch films with subtitles. So that's, it's not new. I know a lot of people don't like it, but get used to it. Also, it's awesome. But watching this film, I was so grateful that it comes with the subtitles that let you know, because my ear is not attuned to it, when the characters were speaking Wolof or Arabic or French or English, right? And you think to yourself, like, where and when are people speaking French in this movie? And when do we see French? And it's it's on cell phone screens. It's in administrative places. The people in this film largely speak Wolof among themselves. The language of sort of like police cooperation, international police cooperation is English. Crucially, like there's just so much going on there, that I absolutely loved. That it's a film that you have to pay attention to, but I felt so rewarded for paying attention to it.
Yeah. I want to talk a bit about too. It's very significant concerns with gender and with the plight of women. So Ada, obviously she's in love with Suleiman, but she is given no real choice but to marry Omar. Who as Anita, I think, commented earlier, like, we don't know anything about him, but that's kind of, in a way, I would say by design, because like Ada doesn't like him or know him as a person, or really want to know him as a person, but yet she is in this position where she, her life in that regard is not her own. Those decisions are not her own to make.
Also, we don't know anything about Suleiman either. So like,
well, no, this is true.
Which they aren't super relevant. Like they're figures, but it is really about her and her perspective and her feelings.
Yes.
And I think that we associate more with Suleiman because she's so enamored with him.
100%. Yeah. It is very much like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we know that he is not getting wages and that he left, and you get a little bit of time with him, but it's just, to me, they're both kind of equally not known because they're not really important.
I agree completely. I think you're exactly right. But I mean, there's one scene that I think we have to at least mention, and that is that that at a certain point in the film, because her father demands it, I believe
that shit.
Ada is taken to a doctor for a virginity test, which I mean, I presume is checking whether the hymen is intact. Is that what that would entail?
It has to be, which we all know is not accurate. Yeah.
Right.
So I was sitting there being like, oh fuck. Like, is she like, because regardless of whether she slept with anyone else, like that shit breaks real easy.
Right.
It's not accurate. And so the whole time I'm like, oh God, is that where this is going?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And of course, the horror of knowing that this is a thing that happens, that, there are places and cultures. And by the way, is not restricted to, other parts of the world, by the way, like the concern with women's purity and young girls' purity, but just the ease with which this happens. Like, oh, we are going to the place where this can be done. I'm curious what your thoughts are on.
Sorry, Carol, there's so much stuff about gender in this movie in terms of like the roles that women play, and how like this doesn't feel it's observing. This film is observing the gender roles, and it's showing that Ada doesn't want to do what she's supposed to do, but it's not like she wouldn't just go marry Suleiman and have the same, like, have a poorer life but still fill that role. So like, to me, the film showed issues of gender, but it's not like it was actively critiquing them. And there's moments in which you're like, it's hard to, like, she gets mad at Omar gets mad at her because she's like, I'm not going back with you. And he's like, oh, fuck, whatever. You wouldn't give me a hard on anyway.
Yeah.
Which was one of these moments where you're like, okay, you are showing us how much of a dick this guy is, but just, it felt like, oh, that's just what life is going to be like for a lot of these women.
I didn't get that sense. Like, I do think, in addition to commenting or observing the way that, gender plays out in this culture, it's also very much an observation on generational differences. And so, the older generation, represented by like the parents, especially the older women who, largely wear the veil, and who are perceived or shown as being, religiously observant, being subservient to their husbands and partners, et cetera, versus, this very free, wild, fiercely independent crop of young women. I do get the sense that even if Suleiman had not died, that the relationship between him and Ada would have been different because it was built upon a different kind of foundation. It was not, an arranged marriage, right? But also he treasured her.
Well, but theoretically, but that scene where they're like making out in the beginning got a little gross to me. When she's like, I gotta go, and he's like, no, just one more, let me trick you into kissing you more. And you find out later that he realized, like, you're like, oh, he's not gonna see her again. But that whole scene was fucking gross to me. Like, it was troubling in the sexual pressure that was there and the not respecting her boundaries. And so to me, I'm like, well, who is he any better, any different? I doubt it. She just likes him more. Like, it's not like we know anything about whether he's like a good guy or better than anyone else. He's just not a rich asshole.
Right. No, I guess we there's no objective view. Like, there's no sort of, omniscient view that tells us like this person is good, or there's not like a global omniscient view that tells us this person is good and gives us, like an interpretation of people. But I do think we are meant to understand certain characters via Ada's view of them, right? And her view certainly is, this is the man that I love, and the relationship that we have is built upon like this mutual affection and love,
but it also
versus
feels like
this other person.
Totally. But it also feels like puppy love. Well, also the fact that she was getting married, I was like, is she 12? Like,
I think that was kind of the point. Like,
totally.
And this actually leads me to the other thing. One of the things that I loved about this movie, and I kind of struggled with wrapping my head around how to talk about it. And Carol, when we talked about Booksmart, I had kind of a similar realization. I so appreciate films in which we get to see young people and really gaze at them and witness kind of just the beauty of youth in a way. God, that sounds so cornball and cheesy. And so I'm looking at Atlantics and I'm just like so enamored of the way that Ada looks, her face. And it's not just that she's a beautiful young woman. There's something about the quality of youth that the DP and the director have managed to convey there. And I wanted to talk about it, but it brought up the issue that I have with talking about the movie as a whole and the other people in it, because as I'm looking at her face and body and cherishing this very loving approach to this young Black woman, I'm thinking about the violence, and trauma suffered by these young Black men in the movie. And so this is a kind of comment about me and my movie watching rather than the movie itself. But I was like, how do we get to a point where we can talk about the materiality of the Black body without falling into horrific patterns wherein it is just the body, where the corporality of Black people is always first and foremost, And I'm thinking, like, I want to talk about it, but we don't ever talk about other groups in the same way. Like, I don't know that I've ever heard someone say, like, the white body, in the way that I have heard so many times, the Black body. And yet I want to talk about in this movie how the Black body, I don't know. It's like...
The thing I was thinking about is related to this, but just really quickly about Ada. She was the only woman who didn't have her hair done.
You mean
like it was like she braided her hair at the very end, but like for most of it, her friends all had their hair braided or some other whatever it might be. She was the only one that had like fully natural hair, or like, I don't know how to describe it, but it just wasn't done, which I thought was really interesting. It made her look younger. Right. And it made her look less put together than everyone else, which was an interesting choice.
Less put together. I question the use of the word done, because I think that's the other thing that I love about this movie, right? Like, it is so perfectly not Western. Yeah.
Well, so, and I'm glad you said that, because I wasn't meaning it. I did mean it how I said it. But that, like, we aren't used to that in film and in television, and especially how Black hair is so politicized too, that it's a very interesting choice that the star of the film is like in contrast. You know what? Now that I'm saying it out loud, it's in contrast to her older friends who wear a scarf, the veil, and in contrast to her newer friends who are referred to as the quote unquote sluts, who are like very femme. And she's just kind of like existing in this between state, which makes a lot of sense now that I say that out loud.
It does. And I think, it is very important that she has hair that I don't think is like chemically processed, but has certainly been, like brush or, blown dry and straight. But it is escaping the the band that she has trying to hold it back in the way that like her emotions are escaping and her desires are escaping. But then at the end, she does get her hair braided, by Dior, who is just amazing to me. And I want Dior's life, like running that bar on the beach. Oh my God. And just, smoking and waking up and getting high. But she gets her hair done in this very traditional African style. She does not wear a wig or a weave like some of her other friends. She does get this very traditional African style, but it is her version of how she is making the decision to do this. I just thought, little things like that I loved.
So the thing about bodies, so this I don't think is necessarily as much about Black bodies and what you were talking about, but I made a note about how this story is told through the lens of women. And so this is, we've already done a spoiler warning, but that the women, it's almost entirely women that have their bodies possessed. And it is through the women that we're hearing the demands of these men, and that they're the ones doing the haunting. And so I'm torn in how I'm interpreting that, because it was fucking visually cool. Like it was really neat to see them and this component, but also like, it's I don't know, it's about men, or it's the men who are controlling the situation and therefore controlling women's bodies. Right? Do you see my conundrum here?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it made sense to me in that if the closest person to you is your partner, your girlfriend, your wife, or whatever, then, it makes a sort of sense that if you are to come back and possess someone, it would be that person. But then Issa, the detective who was investigating Ada's case and the arson with in the marriage bed, there would be no reason for him to be possessed by Suleiman.
Look, I gotta say, that shit. I made 3 notes. One of them was she made out with the cop. She fucked the cop. Like,
those are 2 of your 3 notes.
Well, that was one. That was one of the 3 notes. But like, why did he possess the cop? Like, cool twist, story plot twist, blah, 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 whatever. But like, that was very disturbing to me, that she like is hooking up with this cop dude that was harassing her and like threw her in jail, was being shitty. And then like, she's like, cool, I totally believe that you're my ex-lover and I'm going to fuck you for the first time I ever have sex, which is really the cop guy. I didn't like that. I thought the way it was shot was really interesting. And I like the mirror kind of thing. But I was just like, that is a choice that was made that I feel uncomfortable with.
Well, I think, I don't know. I have not read anything from the director about why that specific choice was made, as opposed to Suleiman. I mean, what would it have been for him to possess Ada, right? Like, where would the story have gone there? I don't know why that particular choice was made, but I found myself, taking on some of Ada's investment in it and remembering the, like, just intense emotion you feel as a young person when you are in love with someone, in a way that almost makes no sense to people who are older and who've lived a little bit longer, and who have
completely,
gotten
I was thinking that too.
Your whole world is this person that you meet, underneath the Ferris wheel or whatever.
So for those who give a shit, I don't disagree with anything that either of you have said, but I had a really hard time getting through this movie. And it's one of those movies where I'm like, I'm so glad this exists. I think it is really smart. It's just a little too Caro for me. Just a little, and then I feel like I'm not intellectual enough. Like, I go through a lot of emotions when I watch these kinds of movies, because I feel like I'm supposed to really like it and that I should be whatever. But I watched it in 2 sittings and there were many pauses. And I feel like I will also say that, like, watch this movie and like give yourself the space to watch it. I watched it because I had to watch it quickly to record the podcast, et cetera, et cetera. And so I feel like I wasn't in the right mindset, but it is very slow. And you kind of have to go into it realizing that it's like it's kind of like a meditative viewing experience in some ways.
It is. Don't watch this if you can with your phone in your hand doing something else.
Well, you can't because you won't be able to understand what they're saying.
Right. But also, I don't think this is the kind of film wherein if you watch it in a couple of sittings that it somehow, hurts the viewing experience or your understanding of it. I think this film is wide and deep enough to be able to support that. But I really would encourage people to check out this movie. And if you don't like it, you don't like it. That's cool. Everybody likes what they like. But I would ask you, and this is from your old pal Ebbs, if you do not like the movie, before writing it off or dismissing it, ask yourself, what is it about this that I don't like?
I want to say in my defense, before you're like, you hate black people.
Well, that is true. That is true.
That I thought fucking Peaches was goddamn boring as well. And those were white people.
Okay. So anyways, ask yourself why you don't like the movie, because I do think, and ask yourself like hard questions about like your viewing diet, right? Because if you are not used to this kind of film, then it can be hard viewing for you. And I don't think there's any shame in recognizing like, I'm just not used to this kind of thing. And here's why, but I would ask people to ask themselves that question. And I mean, it's like Carol said, like how many of us here in this country, who are not the children of immigrants or immigrants ourselves, from the African continent, how many of us know anything about African cinema? Like for real. Yeah. If it's not something like this that's, got play in a major international film festival, we would never have heard of it probably, Yeah.
All right, y'all, watch the fucking movie.
Oh, Jesus.
It's on Netflix. You have no excuses. You have a Netflix password in some capacity, whether you pay for it or not. All right, we'll be back with our weekly freakouts.
Hey friends, Carolyn here. If you enjoy listening in on our conversations each week about what's happening in the world of media and pop culture and how that impacts our larger culture, please head on over to patreon.com/femfreak and help us keep bringing FFR to you. What's your freak out?
Now it's time to talk about what's been thrilling us, moving us, upsetting us, or infuriating us this past week. Carolyn?
Hey.
Hi.
I'm going to freak out. Hi. I'm going to freak out about...
Hi. Are you going to freak out?
Do you want me to freak out or not, Anita?
Go for it.
I'm going to freak out about another Caro movie, another film that is just so incredibly compelling and watchable, and I don't understand why other people have a hard time with them. But a film that just went into wider release here in the U.S., called Portrait of a Lady on Fire. This is a film by the acclaimed French filmmaker Céline Sciamma. There's so much I love about this movie. So it takes place in like the 1770s. It is a lesbian love story. I would say that to me, it is that rare film that is truly sensual and sexy. And it is, in my view, sensual and sexy because it really takes the time to establish the undercurrent of emotions and the longing between its two leads, that the longing under the surface, so that you really feel it, which to me is so much more erotic and powerful than, the kind of whatever, like a cursory sex scene that we so often get in mainstream movies that just doesn't do anything for me. It is it's such it's a fascinating and richly layered film. I was reminded of our conversation last week about women in fiction experiencing cramps or not experiencing cramps. Women in this film definitely experience cramps. And also, though, interestingly, there's a young woman in the film who, and I don't think this is a spoiler, has an unwanted pregnancy. And these methods that I'm sure are based in historical tradition and fact from the period to try to sort of induce, I think, a miscarriage or cause pregnancy to be lost. And that whole kind of sequence is really fascinating. there is a brief conversation. So one of the primary characters is a painter, a young woman painter, and there's a conversation briefly about how she's not allowed to study and paint nude male models. She can study and paint nude female models, but not nude male models, because men are the subject of great art, right? Art that focuses on women is inherently of a lower tier. Mm-hmm. And that is the tier to which she, as an artist who happens to be a woman, is relegated herself. To allow her to understand and paint male anatomy would be to allow her access to a world of greater art that she is from which she is forbidden. So, I mean, that is just absolutely fascinating. It's deeply concerned with patriarchy. It is extremely romantic and just beautiful. Yes, Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Extraordinary film. Please go see it.
Awesome. Ebony, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm freaking out about a podcast that's new to me that I'm really enjoying. It's called Off Menu, co-hosted by two British comedians, James Acaster and Ed Gamble. The conceit of it is they invite people on and they basically ask them, to walk through what their dream meal would be. They start off with, starter, entree, dessert. And so you will have, it tends to be, celebrities or people in entertainment. And the episode I just listened to was Anthony Head, Giles from Buffy. It was a really good episode. But so people will say I want, tapas from this restaurant I had, on my honeymoon in Spain. And I want, this sea bass, from this place that I went to in New York and whatever. And so it just allows them to tell really great stories about their lives, their careers. It's a funny show. It's not just, people talking about food, although that's a huge part of it. And that's great. But yeah, I think, Anita, for someone who loves food and going out to eat as much as you would, it is a hilarious show. But I also just love hearing about people sharing meals and everything. So Off Menu with James Acaster and Ed Gamble. I've listened to 4 episodes so far. Armando Iannucci is really good. Anthony Head. I can't remember who else I've listened to, but check it out. Anita's freaking out about going to sleep tonight.
Boy, I had to stay up late tonight too. All right. Did I freak out about Sex Education season 2 already? I did, right?
Not an episode that I was on.
Well, shit.
You can freak out about it.
I'm not gonna, but I'm still freaking out about that. It's real fucking good. I'm gonna freak out about Dollface on Hulu. So here's the deal. Here's the stitch, y'all.
The stitch?
The stitch.
Okay.
The crochet hook. The needle.
God.
Okay. Hulu kept being like, watch Dollface, watch Dollface, watch Dollface. And I was like, all right, fuck it. I got nothing else to watch. So I put it on. It's a comedy with Kat Denning, who you would remember from Two Broke Girls, but you don't because you didn't watch that show because it was fucking racist trash. Anyways, the show is charming. It's not amazing and great and perfect and you should totally go out and watch it. But I'm like, if you want to watch something on your lunch break, it's one of those kinds of shows. And I was surprisingly amused by it. The premise is that, I don't even remember her name, Kat Denning's character, Jules, I think her name's Jules. Her longtime boyfriend dumps her and she realizes that she has no friends and no life or anything outside of that relationship. And so the whole show is about her learning how to have friends again and how to have female friends again. And, there's something kind of cute about that, surviving a breakup and figuring out how her character is supposed to be really awkward and weird and doesn't know how to socialize and doesn't really want to go to parties. And she's reconnecting with her college best friend. There's also a whimsical nature where all of a sudden the environment transforms and she's talking to an anthropomorphic cat.
I'm into it.
that. We've all been there.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. There you get on a bus about and the bus is driven by the cat and then some people get off at the rebound central. Some people get off, it's cute. It's cute. And it's
how it happens.
It's also you're talking about white shows. It's not all white cast, but it is so fucking white because it is deeply making fun of millennial culture. The place that she works is basically Goop, and her boss is a caricature. I don't know how you caricature Gwyneth Paltrow, but it's a caricature of her. So it's that, it's charming.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna say. Oh, and hey, guess what?
What?
We have a listener freak out this week.
Shut up.
We love when that happens.
We do. We don't have it happen enough.
We do not.
Y'all send in your freak outs.
Send in your freak outs. But before you do that, take a listen to David Nylander talk about the Dragon Prince. I wonder if he's like Scandinavian and it's like David or David instead of David, like an American would say his name. You let us know, buddy. You let us know how to say your name.
Little buddy. Okay.
Hi, Feminist Frequency. I would like to freak out about the Netflix show The Dragon Prince. It is a fantasy show targeted towards kids, featuring a lot of elements widely associated with the fantasy genre, dragons, magic, elves, etc. But it has a new and fresh take on it, making it stand out from other works of fantasy, in my opinion. Because while the overall story has a somewhat darker tone, it doesn't stop the show from being quirky and having lots of humoristic elements. It's one of those shows that cater both to young and mature audiences in that it's funny to both kids and adults. The show has put some effort into representation, having queer characters with disabilities, as well as characters of many different ethnicities. That goes for both the actual characters and the voice actors portraying them. I get the feeling they're trying to move away from gender stereotypes as well in the show, even though there are still some ways to go. It handles racism, raising morally and ethically complex questions, and throughout the show blurs the lines between good and evil. That's not to say that there isn't a good and evil side in the story, but the bad guys aren't evil just for the hell of it. They have their own motivations, which you as the audience can understand. I absolutely love this show, and I look forward to someday watching it with my daughter when she gets a little older. It's on its 3rd season now, and from what I've gathered, it will be 6 or 7 seasons in total. I definitely encourage you to give it a watch. The episodes are just 20 minutes long, so time is really no excuse. That's all from me. Keep doing what you're doing. Live long, and may the force be ever in your favor.
Thank you so much for that. All right, y'all, submit your own freakout at feministfrequency.com/freakout. That's FREQ.
O-U-O-U-T.
Yes.
We got there.
You got there. Thank you so much for listening to Feminist Frequency Radio. That's what you have been listening to, in case you were unclear of this fact. Thank you for making it this far. We appreciate you. Stay tuned for the Freakin' After Party, which takes you a little bit further of more of this wonderful content that we release.
Oh, boy.
Which is only available to backers of this podcast, so you can give us money for more of this content.
Oh, boy. With that intro, why wouldn't you?
Patreon.com/FemFreak. You can find us everywhere great podcasts are found, and if you haven't yet, go to iTunes and subscribe, rate, and review us. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and all the social medias at FemFreak. This show is engineered by Rob Pera. Carrie Stimpson provides technical support, artwork by Jamie Varon, and our intro music is by the incredible Phil Circus. Ooh. I mean, all of those people are incredible.
They really are.
Yeah. Anyways, join us next week for another feminist dive into pop culture. Bye.
Bye.
Later.